Thanks everyone for joining today. Today I wanted to focus on some more geometry. We've talked about perimeter and areas once before, so I was going to focus on volumes today. As we go, if I ask a question, you can just send a chat message and reply in the chat box. So for volumes, it's really helpful to know how to use this reference sheet. This over here is a copy of the reference sheet that you will actually get on the exam. You can see this reference sheet and access it at any time. So for volumes, we have the volume formulas over here, and we need to know what each shape means. So if it says a cone looks like, an ice cream cone, either with the pointy end up or the pointy end down. A cylinder, that's like a can. So I heard a few people join in just to catch you up really quick. We're talking about geometry today, and we're focusing on volumes. And we're looking at the volume formulas you can actually see on the exam. This sheet you get on the exam itself. So we just talked about the different shapes so far, that there are cones, there are cylinders, there are pyramids. So a pyramid looks like an Egyptian pyramid. A rectangular prism is basically a box. A right prism is any shape. Sometimes, like, maybe you'll have a triangular right prism. And a sphere is like a basketball. So I heard a few more people join. We're talking about volumes today, and we've talked about all the different shapes that are on the exam. You might see cone, which is like an ice cream cone, cylinder, which is like a can, pyramid, which is like the Egyptian pyramids, prism, which is like a box, a right prism, which can be any shape. So this one's a triangular right prism, or a sphere. So for our particular problem right here, it says a cylindrical glass has a diameter of 3 inches and a height of 8 inches. So cylindrical just means it's a cylinder. So we need the shape that looks kind of like a can of soda. So on a cylinder, there's 2 important lines that we need to know. The first one is the height. The height will go from circle to circle. And they gave us the height as 8 inches. The other important piece of information on a cylinder is the radius. So the radius goes from the center of the circle to the outside. But we have an issue here. In the problem, they gave us diameter. So what's diameter when what we really need is radius? So diameter goes all of the way across the circle. So if diameter is all the way across and radius is only halfway across, how can we find the radius when we know diameter? And again, when I ask a question, you can just type into the chat box and put your answer in the chat box. How can we find the radius when we know the diameter is 3? Good. Divide by 2. Anytime they give you diameter, in this case our diameter is 3, divide by 2, and that gives you the radius. So make sure that you have the correct information. In the question, they gave you what you need to find the correct information, but we actually needed the radius instead of the diameter. So the volume formula for the cylinder is pi times radius squared times height. They don't put the multiply signs there, they only put pi r squared h. I always write them in. Anytime you have numbers or letters next to each other, that's really multiplication. So pi, we can approximate with 3.14. Radius, we found to be 1.5. And then the formula says to square that, so it has an exponent of 2. And height is 8. Now we have to think back to our order of operations when we go to simplify this. We have some multiplication going on, and we have an exponent here. So according to order of operations, which one do we do first? Do we do the exponent first or the multiplication first? Good, thank you. It is exponents. That's correct. Exponents comes before multiplication. E comes before n. So we have to do the 1.5 squared first. In your calculator, you could do 1.5 times 1.5. Squared means multiply it by itself, which is 2.25. Or the calculator does have a squared button. So you could, I'm going to clear this out, you could do 1.5 and then hit an x squared button, and that will do the same thing. Then we just plug the rest in, 3.14 times 2.25 times 8. Once it's down to all multiplication, we just type the whole thing. So 56.52, which we then have to round. So which one's our correct answer? Even though it's not the exact number we got, it was rounded. Very good. B is correct. Good. Oh, and just to mention, when it says cubic inches, that's the same thing as inches cubed. All volumes are to the third power for the measurement, not for the number, but they'll say cubic inches or inches cubed because when you multiplied this out, all of these were actually in inches. So like the 1.5 inches squared is, and I'm gonna have to write it in a different spot because we're out of room. 1.5 inches squared, the 1.5 is 2.25, but the inches would just be inches times inches, which is inches squared. Then when you multiply by the 8 inches, no, I forgot to write the squared, sorry. 2.25 inches squared. Then when you multiplied by the 8 inches, and the 3.14 did not have inches because pi doesn't have a measurement like that. It's not centimeters or inches. It's just the number 3.14. So when you multiplied it all together, the inches squared times inches made it that inches cubed. It's not super important to know that. Just don't get confused when it says cubic inches or inches cubed. That just always goes with volume. Okay. So of course, they're not always going to just ask you to straight up find a volume. Usually, they do a multi-part question. You're going to have to find the volume and then do something else with it. So for this one, Erica wants to send a package. The box she has is 8 inches by 8 inches by 6 inches. If it costs 5 cents per cubic inch to mail a package, How much will it cost Erica? So first, we need to find what shape it is. When it says the box, looking at our formula list, which one of these was a box? The cone, the cylinder, pyramid, rectangular prism, right prism, or sphere? Good. Rectangular prism. A rectangular prism is the fancy name for a box. And that's important to know because if you don't know which one to pick and which formula to use, then you don't know what volume you're going to find. So volume for a rectangular prism is L times W times H. That stands for length times width times height. And that's information they just give you. 8 by 8 by 6. So we can plug those numbers in to find the volume of the box. This will not be our final answer. This is just a step in the process. So in our calculator, we can do 8 times 8 times 6, which is 384. I heard someone just join in, so just to recap, we're working on volumes, and for a box, that's the same thing as a rectangular prism. So we're using the formula length times width times height and plugging in the numbers. 8 times 8 times 6 gave us 384. So that's not the final answer because that's not what they asked for. They didn't ask for the volume. They said, how much will it cost to ship the package? So if it costs 0.05 per cubic inch, most of the time when you see the word per, it means to multiply. We take the volume, 384, and multiply by that cost per cubic inch. So 384 times 0.05 is 19.2. Now this is money. We always need 2 digits. We can't just have 1 after the decimal. So we just put an extra 0 on because this is actually 20 cents. So $19.20. So you do have to watch out for those multi-step problems. Sometimes you find the volume, but then you have to do extra stuff with it. So same thing on this problem. This problem, you're going to find a volume, but then you're going to have to do some extra stuff with it. So a cylinder is drilled into a rectangular prism with a square base. So they show us in a picture, we have that prism, that box, and they took a cylinder out of it. When it says drilled into, we're removing that piece. The circular hole drilled out of the center of the square base has a diameter that is half the length of the side of the square. What is the approximate volume of the prism with the cylinder removed? So in the end, removed means at some point we're going to have to subtract. Removing something really implies subtraction. But before we can get to the subtract part, we're going to have to find a couple of volumes. We want the volume of the big shape. We want the volume of the prism. And since the cylinder is the piece being removed, we want to subtract the volume of the cylinder. So we need the formulas for each of these in order to then find the final answer, the final volume. So I'm going to go over to the separate page this time. We have our cylinder formula. That's the second one on the list. And the rectangular prism formula, which is the length times width times height. So the prism formula was our length times width times height. And cylinder is pi times radius squared times height. So we have to figure out what are each of these numbers from the picture itself. So the prism is a little more straightforward. What is the length, the width, and the height of the prism according to the picture? And just in case these numbers are too small, I'm going to write them bigger nearby so it's easier to see. So you're saying the audio keeps going in and out? Let me check my connection really quick. Sorry for the break. Okay, I'm going to try and leave the audio and come back in, see if that works any better. So I think I'm back in. Let me know if it still is cutting out. And I'm going to try and make sure the mic is closer and stuff, but yeah, send a chat message if it's still not working well. So to recap then, since we took a break from the problem, we are trying to find the volume of the prism minus the volume of the cylinder, which means we subtract because it was removed. The cylinder was taken out. So we are currently trying to find the volume of the prism, which we have to identify just from the picture. What's the length, the width, and the height from the picture itself? Okay. So it's still cutting out. Length is 20, height is 40. So you guys are correct, 20, 20, and 40. So let me try one more thing with the audio since it's still cutting out. Oh, and also someone did post the actual volume of that all multiplied together. Sorry, I'm trying to fix the audio since it keeps cutting out. I'm going to try one more thing. So can you hear me now? So I'm trying to,
Amanda also stated that she switched to her phone and I just switched to my phone. Okay, so everyone can hear me. If it is still cutting in and out, Amanda did have a great idea. It may be your computer doesn't have a great connection, so you may want to join the audio by phone instead of by computer. Okay, so we found the volume of the prism, and we need the volume of the cylinder. And this is the tricky one. The prism, it was just easy to send, it was easy to just look at the picture and know these are the length, the width, and the height. The cylinder, we need to figure out from the picture what's the radius and what's the height of the cylinder. So the radius is the harder one. There's a lot more to think about and do. The height, you can kind of recognize it's going to be as tall as the prism itself. So what's the height of the cylinder? Good. The height of the cylinder is 40. It matches the height of the prism. So then we have to use this sentence I underlined to find the radius. And first we have to find the diameter. A lot of the times they give a diameter first, and then you use that to find the radius. So it said the diameter is half the length of the side. So diameter would be all the way across the circle, and it's half the length of the side. So what are we going to divide by 2? We have to divide something by 2 because it's half. Which number are we going to divide by 2? Good, 20. The side is 20, so half of that is 10. But that gives you the diameter. That's all the way across the circle. So radius is half of diameter, which means we have to divide by 2 again. So our radius is actually 5. And they make it that multi-step process to make it a little more confusing. You just have to watch out for what number do I actually need in this volume formula. And then pi was just part of the formula itself. So now that we have all the numbers, we need to plug it into a calculator. This is one you cannot do without a calculator, since pi is that weird decimal. We do 3.14. Oh, except, what do we have to do first? Before we do any multiplication, what do we do first? Because of order of operations. Exponents, good. 5 squared comes before the multiplication. So 5 to the second power is 25. Or you could have done 5 times 5. Now we can do pi times 25 times 40. So 3.14 times 25 times 40. And so notice on your answer choices, they have the 3,140, they have the 16,000, they have these answers that are part of the process. Again, they want you to think maybe you're done when you're not quite done yet. So when we do the subtraction, Crystal is correct that the answer is C. When you subtract those, you get 12,860. Anytime you use pi, your answer could possibly be off by a little bit. If maybe you did your subtraction and you got 12,856, just go for the closest. You might have to round. So just keep that in mind, especially anytime you use pi, you might just have an answer that's close to the correct answer. So that's a setup where we have to use volumes to subtract. They also like to do setups where you have to use volumes and add. So Lester has a lunchbox made from a rectangular prism and half a cylinder as pictured in the diagram below. What is the approximate total volume of the lunchbox? So on this lunchbox, we have two shapes. They said a prism, that's the lower half, the box part, and a cylinder. We're going to have to do the same thing we did on the previous problem, but instead of subtraction, we would add. We want the volume of the prism plus the volume of half a cylinder. And that's another important piece. They did not give us an entire cylinder. And most of the time, the volume of the prism is pretty straightforward. We know volume of a prism is length times width times height. And they just give us those numbers. I'm going to rewrite them again just in case they're too small to see. So what do we get for the volume of this prism? Okay, we got one answer of 14,400. I didn't want to type it into a calculator yet so that you guys could try it, but I don't know the answer without typing it in. Okay, so 14,400 is correct. Good. So usually the prism, pretty straightforward. It's just multiplication. The cylinder is almost always a little more difficult because they don't immediately write in all the information. And our cylinder this time is sideways. The height of the cylinder is in a different spot. Usually the height is the up and down line. This time the height is that sideways line, which they don't have labeled, but you can almost always find it from other information on the picture. What number is the height, even though it's in a different spot? Which line matches that same length and is the height? Good. 40. That bottom line and that top line of a rectangle, they're the same. This is also 40. So we're partway there. We know 40 now. And we always know pi is 3.14. And usually, again, this radius is where we get some issues. So without even discussing it, since we've had a couple problems, what do you guys think the radius is for this shape? Let's get a guess first, and then we'll talk about how we get it. Okay, we have one guess of 9 so far. Any other guesses? Or do people agree and think it's also 9? Okay, second answer of also 9. So, and an answer to the whole question, A, possibly, I don't know yet. So 9 is correct. If this bottom line is 18, so it's the top line, so the diameter is 18 because it's going all the way across the circle. You must divide that by 2 to get the radius. So we use a radius of 9. We do have to remember to square first. 9 squared is 81. And then we type the whole thing in, 3.14 times 81 times 40. is 10,173.6. So the prism was the entire, prism was the entire shape. Cylinder, and it's easy to forget, I was almost going to go straight to adding those two numbers together. But the volume is half of the cylinder. So we still need one more step because they didn't give us an entire cylinder. What do we do to this 10,173.6 in order to get half a cylinder? Divide by 2, and then we're going to add in a minute. So we divide by 2. So the volume of the half a cylinder is 5,086.8. So answer A isn't the final answer. Answer choice A is only the cylinder piece, the half a cylinder. But they didn't ask us for just that cylinder piece. They asked us for the total volume. So Crystal's correct, and earlier Kenya said to add. We put those two answers together and add them. And you do have to watch out for that. They love to give you answers, and you're like, oh, I got this number, it's on my list, I'm done. But there's sometimes extra steps to get to the final answer. So 19,486.8, which you do have to round. It's not exactly this amount. They did say to approximate, so the closest one is that answer choice C. Good. So sometimes they don't even give you the picture. They just tell you the shape in the question. This one says, Tina fills a cone-shaped funnel 2/3 of the way full with liquid. If the diameter of the cone is 12 centimeters and the height of the cone is 15 centimeters, what is the approximate amount of liquid in the cone? So our question wants the actual amount of liquid. So if possible, it helps to draw the shape. It says it's a cone-shaped funnel. So cones look like ice cream cones. And it's 2/3 of the way full of liquid. So it's been filled. There's liquid down here. And it's about 2/3 of the way full. Mine kind of looks like half, but we'll know it's 2/3 even though my picture's a little bit off. So then how do we label this picture? They gave us the diameter. Diameter is always all the way across the circle. And the height of the cone goes from top to bottom. So it's usually either written to the side or you could write it in the center. And then we need the volume formula. Probably don't have this memorized, which is why they give you that reference sheet. Volume of a cone is this 1/3 pi times radius squared times h. And even though it doesn't say multiply on the volume reference sheet, I always write the multiplies in, just so I know what I'm doing as I go through the problem. So we'll talk about how to plug this 1/3 in a minute. First, we need to know what's the radius, what's the height. So the height they just gave us, we know it's the 15. What is the radius? They gave us diameter again. So what's the radius of this shape? Good, 6. Now you get so used to them giving you diameter, be careful if they said the radius is 12, just use that number. If they give you diameter, divide by 2. If they give you radius, just use it. So 12 divided by 2 gave us the 6. So then plugging this in, we learned exponents come first. Do the 6 squared first, which is 36. So when you plug 1/3 into a calculator, we've seen it before, but it's easy to forget. And fractions usually freak our brains out. We're like, oh, it's a fraction, I don't want to do this. But all we really have to do is the fraction bar means to divide. In the calculator, you would just do 1 divided by 3, then times pi, which we're going to use 3.14, times 36 times 15. Now, order of operations does say multiply before divide, but it's a little bit misleading. Multiplication and division, you actually just do left to right. Same thing if it's all addition and subtraction. So even though division comes before the multiplication on this list, we just type it in. So one person got the answer of 565.2, and you're probably correct. But just to show it, type it all in, and 565.2 is correct. Now notice again, that is on our answer list. That says C. But is it what they asked for? That number gives us the total volume if we filled the cone to the top. If we filled the entire thing with liquid, that would be the volume. They didn't fill the entire thing with liquid. They filled it 2/3 of the way full. So when it asks for the approximate amount of the liquid, we actually have one more step. The 565.2, any amount they filled it, we just multiply by that fraction times the 2/3. So times 2 divided by 3 is 376.8. So you have to watch out for that again. They really like giving you an answer on that multiplication or on that multiple choice list that you will get. You'll be doing the problem correctly, but you won't be finished. You still have an additional step or an additional couple of steps depending on what they're asking for. So always really try and focus, what are they asking for? And when you get your answer, say, does this actually answer what they're asking for? So this one I took directly from the 2009 OGT. This is one of their free response where you have to write sentences and stuff. I really wanted to focus on how should you write this out? What's a good way to label everything? Because you can lose a lot of points by not providing enough information on these free response type questions. So for lunch, Fania drank a can of cola that has a diameter of 2 inches and a height of 5 inches. After school, she drank a can of juice that measures twice the diameter and twice the height of the can of cola. In your answer document, find the volumes of each can. So here's one thing to answer. Find the volumes of each can. Show work or provide any explanation to support your answers. Determine how many times larger the volume of the juice can is than the volume of the cola can. So here's a second question to answer. So for finding the volume, we have a cola can and a juice can. And I would actually literally write out this label. We're finding the volume of the cola in one spot, volume of juice in the other. Then draw a picture. A can is really a cylinder. Just like box was really that rectangular prism formula, a can really is that cylinder formula. And then label that picture appropriately. So it says the diameter is 2 inches. Diameter is the circle part, and it goes all the way across. And height is 5. Height went from top to bottom. And I might even label to the side, D equals 2, H equals 5. So they know, you know, D is diameter, H is height. But with our volume formula for a cylinder, again, you probably don't have it memorized. That's okay. That's why they have the formula sheet. It is pi times radius squared times H. We need radius. They gave us diameter, we need radius. What is the diameter of this shape? Sorry, I think I said the wrong word. What is the radius of this shape? Good, radius is 1. Diameter divided by 2 is 1. Now you could write 2 divided by 2 equals 1, or you could label R equals 1, as long as they know you know the radius is 1. And I'd actually write out the formula itself, knowing which formula is important. And then you plug it in. 1 squared times 5. And since it said to show your work, I'd show the steps. 1 squared is 1. And I'd write in, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. 1 squared just comes out as 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. And then our volume is 3.14 times 1 times 5, so that is correct, of 15.7. So our volume is 15.7. If you wanted to put units, you could put inches cubed. I don't think you would be docked any points for not writing the inches cubed there, though. So that was part of the question, volume of the cola. Now we need volume of the juice. So we go through the same process, but for the juice. And they didn't just tell us the diameter and the height. They told us that it was twice the diameter and twice the height of the cola. So what's the diameter and the height of the juice if it's twice the diameter and the height of the cola? Good, diameter is 4, height is 10. Good job. And I'd still label it on your picture. The more clear and organized you are, the more points you're going to get. You can get partial points, so even if you don't get the whole problem correct, still label out as much as you can. But we still need the radius. So radius is diameter divided by 2, which is just 4 divided by 2, which is 2. Yep, that is correct. The radius is 2. And now we plug it in. We have 3.14 times 2 squared times 10. And make sure, my mind, I wanted to write 5 again because 5 was used on the last problem. Make sure you're using the number for the correct shape. Where you're doing 2 things at once, sometimes your brain is like, oh, use the other number. So just double check that you're using the correct number for the shape you're working on. 2 squared is 4. And then what will the entire volume equal of the juice? 125.6. That sounds correct. Yep, good. So we've answered part of the problem. We've found the volume of each can. If you want to, cross it out so you know I did that. We're done with that. But it had one more part to the question. Determine how many times larger the volume of the juice can is than the volume of the cola can. So the keywords here are how many times larger. What do you think we do to figure that out? So we have one person who said 109.9. Any other guesses, or do you guys agree? Do you think it's also 109.9? The 109.9, okay, so we have another person who thinks it's 109.9. It's all about this one word, times. If they said the difference, if they said find the difference, 109.9 would be correct. Difference means to subtract the two. So this stuff up here is not stuff you would write down for the question. This is me just talking about the problem. So you guys did 125.6 minus 15.7, and that would be correct if they used the word difference. Where they use the word times, what we want to actually do is divide the two numbers. Times implies multiplication, but when it says how many times larger, we have to do the opposite process. We have to do 125.6 divided by 15.7, which is 8. So even though the 109.9 is close, it's something they would ask and they have asked a lot. Finding the difference is used a lot. That how many times larger means to divide. And I wouldn't just leave the number here. I would actually write a sentence out. I would say the juice can is 8 times larger than the cola can. Anytime you're doing one of these free response questions, the more specific you are, the better. They want to know what you know. So if you just write an 8, even though they know that's the correct times larger, they want to know that you know specifically it's the juice can being larger than the cola can. Any other questions about this problem? It's a lot of steps because these free response questions just involve a lot. Okay, let's move on then. So I think this is the last volume question I have. And it just has one small difference. So a manufacturer wants to make a rectangular storage box. We learned that box means that rectangular prism formula. Which is the length times width times height. Oh, sorry, let me finish reading the question. With volume 0.75 cubic meters, length 1.5 meters, and width 0.4 meters, what is the height of the box? So they didn't give us H. They told us V, they told us L, they told us W. They said V is 0.75, L is 1.5, and W is 0.4. They did not tell you H. So we have two options. We can write it out like I did here as an equation and do opposite operations to solve. Or, since it's multiple choice, we can just try each of our answer choices. Each of these answer choices are our possible height values. one of these is the correct height. So we could try, and I'm going to color code it. Let's try answer choice A first. If we plug in 0.15 for the height, then we just plug this into our calculator and see, does it equal to 0.75? 1.5 times 0.4 times 0.15 is 0.09. That is incorrect. We should have gotten 0.75. So then we try, yep, so no, it did not work. So now we try the next one, 0.45. 1.5 times 0.4 times 0.45 is okay, so one person thinks it's D. Let's check this one. It's not 0.27. Another person thinks it's D. So since everyone thinks it's D, we're going to skip to that. You guys are probably correct, but just to double check it, we're going to try answer choice D of 1.25. 1.5. Nope, let me clear this out. 1.5 times 0.4 times 1.25 is correct. Good job, guys. 0.75 came out as our volume. So you can use the answer choices. If you don't have answer choices or you wanted to solve it the regular way, then you would multiply those two numbers together. You want to always simplify everything you can. So 0.6. And then you do opposites, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So dividing by the 0.6 gets rid of it, and then you just plug that into a calculator. And decimals are weird. I know the 1.25 is bigger than the volume of 0.75, just because decimals kind of work out funny when you divide and multiply by them. Good. So we do have a little more time left. I wanted to also talk about Pythagorean theorem if we got a chance today. So volumes are all about finding that three-dimensional shape. How much could you fit inside? Pythagorean theorem is all about right triangles. When you have a right triangle, they put that right angle symbol in, that 90-degree symbol. And the sides of the right triangle are considered to be legs and hypotenuses. There are two legs, and the hypotenuse is always the longest side, or you can think of it as being the side that doesn't touch the right angle. It's across from it. So each leg, the right angle symbol actually touches it. The hypotenuse, the right angle symbol, never touches. So the legs are always considered to be A and B, and the hypotenuse is always C. So the Pythagorean theorem, which you may have seen before, so it may sound familiar, is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I believe this one you do need to have memorized. Let's go check the formula sheet to be sure. Yes, it is not on here at all. So you do need to have this memorized. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So on this particular question, it just gives you the information. If A equals 5 and B equals 12 are the sides of a right triangle, find C. So we plug those values in for A and B. A is 5, B is 12, and we don't know C. We're trying to find it, so we leave this as c squared. So order of operations, again, are important. We need to do these exponents first. 5 squared is the same as 5 times 5, which is 25. And 12 squared is the same as 12 times 12, which is 144. Or you can use the squared button in a calculator. 12 squared comes out as that 144. So then the 25 and 144, they're on the same side. They're both to the left of that equal sign. We just add them together. Sometimes we need to do opposites, but sometimes we just combine them with the numbers that are already there. 25 plus 144 is 169. Now again, you see 169 on that answer list. So it looks like the answer is D. But c squared is not the same thing as c. They said find the value of c. Right now we know c squared. So we actually have to do one opposite at the end here. It might look like we're done, but there's one more thing. Does anyone know the opposite of squared? This one we don't see as much, so you don't think about it as much. We know plus and minus are opposites. Multiply and divide are opposites. It's the opposite of raising something to the second power. I didn't see any answers, and that, like I said, this one's a harder one to remember. The opposite of squared is to square root. Squared means take a number, multiply it by itself. Square root is you're looking for a number multiplied by itself that equals the 169. So by square rooting, we get squared, we get rid of the squared, and I see an answer choice of 13, and that's correct. It's hard to figure out square root in your head, so we just plug it into the calculator. The square root button usually kind of looks like a check mark button. So square root of 169 is 13. So answer choice A. Also, if you think about the logic of it, if this side was like 5 centimeters and this was 12 centimeters, this being 169 centimeters just seems out of place. It seems way too big compared to the rest of the sides. So sometimes these problems you can kind of logic your way through. You could have eliminated C and D as answer choices just by saying, these look way too big for that shape. There's no way I go from 5 to 12 to that side being over 100, and then you only have 2 answer choices to think about. So let's do this one last problem, and then we'll be done for today. So find the area of a right triangle if one leg is 5 and the hypotenuse is 15. Now notice this time it didn't say find the other leg or find the hypotenuse. It said find the area. So I'm going to go to our reference sheet again for a triangle. This time we're looking at area formulas, and it's 1/2 times base times height. So let's draw a triangle out and see what information we have. On our right triangle, that's why we have a right angle, one leg is 5. We said the legs are this left side and this bottom side. And the other hypotenuse is 15. So this time we don't have this bottom leg. This was our B spot. And it also happens to be the base. The base of a right triangle is the bottom, the height is this side on the left, the 5. So we have to do Pythagorean theorem, and then we still have the extra step of going in and finding the area. We have to do our a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we only know a is 5 and c is 15. We always take care of our exponents first. 5 squared is 25, and 15 squared is 225. And now we're stuck because 25 is on the opposite side of 225. The other problem, the two numbers were on the same side, we just added them together. This time we have to do opposite. So 25 is adding to the b squared. The opposite is to subtract. And then we still have to do the opposite of squared, which is to square root. When we square root this time, it gives us a decimal. That's okay. I know our answers all say these square roots. It's hard to keep the answer looking like this. So we're just going to use the decimal, and then I'm going to show you how do we figure out which one is the correct answer. So 14.14. So that's just B. That is not our answer because it asked us to find the area. Now we go to our area formula, and we plug in our base that we just found, and our height of 5. So notice in the area, we did not use the 15. The 15 helped us find that base, but we don't use it in the area formula. 1/2 we type in as 1 divided by 2 times the 14.14 times the 5. 35.35. So we don't know which of these is our correct answer choice. What we're going to do is we're going to plug each of these into a calculator and see which one gives us the same decimal. Since we did estimate, we might just be close again. It was like those volume problems where they said to approximate and we were just a little bit away. Our answers here might be a little bit away, but they should be close to this 35.35. So 5 divided by 2 times square root 10. It's easiest to do the square root first, just like we had to do squared first on a lot of problems. So square root of 10 is 3.16. So 5 divided by 2 times 3.16. Is 7.9. We are nowhere near 35.35. So answer choice A is not our answer. Now we go try answer choice B. We want to do the square root first. So square root of 5 first is 2.23. So 5 times 2.23 is 11.15. Still nowhere near our 35.35. We tried the next one. 25 square root 2. Square root of 2 is 1.41. And we're doing the 25 times that for 1.41. And so Amanda is correct. The choice is answer choice C. Just to show you what it comes out as. We get 35.25. It's a little bit off. That's just because we've been using decimals and rounding. Takes a little bit off, but Amanda and Ken, you're both correct. C is the closest. Good. Sorry, we went a little bit over today. We are out of time though. So our next one was Friday. I forgot to bring up my calendar. Friday at, I want to say 4. Yep, thank you, Lisa. Good. Okay, so Friday at 4 p.m. we'll have another one. And I think the OGTs are next week or the week after for most people. So we only have a few more times. to meet. It doesn't hurt to go watch any of the videos again or to practice. If you've already practiced the OGT math tests they have released online, do it again. Practicing over and over again never hurts. And if you have any questions, send me a Remind 101 text and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Everyone have a great day and thanks for joining me today.